Now that is what I'm talking about. Carson Fox here for you on Fox on West Virginia Mountaineers Sports with the recap show of the West Virginia Mountaineers blowing out the Oklahoma State Cowboys 38-14, upping West Virginia's record to 3-2 overall, 2-0, and most importantly in conference play. Meanwhile, the Cowboys fall to 3-3 overall, 0-3 in Big 12 play. Pretty much securing that without like a miracle, they are not getting to the Big 12 Conference Championship game. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with the Oklahoma State football program, not only moving forward throughout the rest of these like 6 weeks through to the end of the regular season, but beyond. But pause on there. I want to talk about West Virginia. The largest margin of victory, 24 points. Against a Big 12 conference opponent since last year's 37-7 win at home in Morgantown, a game I was able to attend over BYU. Before that, a 37-10 win over number 16 Kansas State in 2020, arguably the most forgotten about biggest win of Neil Brown's head coaching career, in at least for West Virginia. So it's a game I always have to feel like I remind myself that, yeah, that happened. Before that, I found this interesting note. I think this is the largest margin of victory, 24 points, against a Big 12 conference opponent on the road since 2016. Yeah, you would think that Will Grier in 2018 or 2017 was able to do this, but no. Actually, it was going back to Iowa State. Skylar Howard and co. and that vaunted West Virginia defense in 2016 defeated the Cyclones 49-19, so a 30-point margin. And also in the same season, Texas Tech 48-17, 31-point margin. So excellent job. It's always important to beat your conference opponents, but doing so on the road is that much bigger, and doing it in blowout fashion, awesome. West Virginia ran the ball 65 times. Great note here by 247 Sports' Chris Anderson. Back in the 1990 backyard brawl against Pitt, in which West Virginia won the game 38-24, ran the ball 66 times. And that is what I would say was the biggest storyline from this game. Give you a quick recap here. I feel as if West Virginia dominated Oklahoma State in the first half, 31-7, thanks to really, I feel like, three big things that we need to talk about for this show. Backup quarterback Nico Marchiol uppercutting the Cowboys defense in disbelief with his touchdown pass to Traylon Ray from 10 yards out, and also had 26 yards rushing in relief of an injured Garrett Green, who had, I think, like a 60-yard run it was there at the end of the first quarter. It was a play that really showed that West Virginia was ready to break out of its shell offensively after its first offensive series ended in a field goal, didn't convert with a touchdown, and then finally, boom, Green hits him, shows off that speed that we were so accustomed to through the 2023 season, putting the Oklahoma State the defense on skates trying to catch him. But instead, Marchiol comes in, that gives them the jab cross to the Oklahoma State defense. And then also the three-headed rushing monster of Green, who then came back shortly after heading to the locker room. Jaheim White and also C.J. Donaldson rushing for 232 yards and 3 touchdowns on 30 carries between the three of them. Holy crap. If you can do that game in and game out, man, the sky is the limit for this offense. And then also, got to credit the West Virginia defense in the first half, holding Oklahoma State to just 7 points and 116 yards on 26 plays. Held down an Oklahoma State offense that ended up losing running back Ollie Gordon to injury, and then benched Alan Bowman with the whole fourth quarter to play in a 38-14 win. So that's how I would summarize the game. I feel like the two key moments of the game, that's why I say I don't say key plays, because one being a play, then the other being a drive, was the first and most important, I feel like, was Jaheim Joseph's second quarter interception when Oklahoma State was down 17-0 at this point, but had an exhilarating 51-yard kickoff return to the West Virginia 39-yard line, thinking Oklahoma State was going to try and make it a game. Cale Cabanis with a big return for Oklahoma State. I don't think he'd had a return at that point in time in the season. We talked about during the pre-show that had really been Brennan Presley doing the duties for the Cowboys. But Cabanis with a big run back, and then Oklahoma State goes 16 yards and 4 plays, and that's when Alan Bowman overthrew his receiver and right into the hands of Jaheim Joseph. So exhilarating, especially when you consider coming back the opposite way. So it's not only just the turnover that you create, it's how you respond with the points off turnovers that are always so huge, always so pivotal. In the same vein, I feel like, as special teams plays, maybe not as just big and game-changing, kickoff returns or blocks returns for touchdowns, but when you have points off turnovers the opposite way, West Virginia goes 7 straight run plays on the next offensive possession, capped off by Garrett Green's 15-yard rushing touchdown to put this game at 24-0. It had Oklahoma State fans headed to the exit in fury. I mean, some of the shots that they had on the crowd were just, I don't want to say stunned, it was more disgust. Just, I can't believe that this is happening. That West Virginia is coming in here on the road to our house, and we are that bad, Oklahoma State, to get beat into the second quarter 24-0. So a lot of the fans at Boone Pickens Stadium were heading out the doors feeling as if they wanted to spend their hot 90-degree Saturday somewhere else rather than baking in the heat there and pounding on the pads with their paddles. So then the second key moment was West Virginia's defense getting the then Garrett Rangel-led Oklahoma State offense off the field in 3 plays, 14 minutes and 3 seconds to play in the fourth quarter at the West Virginia 12-yard line, and the WVU offense goes 88 yards and 88 yards in 8 plays, highlighted by the 41-yard one-handed catch by wide receiver Hudson Clement to put Oklahoma State away early, thanks to C.J. Donaldson's second rushing touchdown of the day to make the game 38-7 at that point. Not enough time for in any chance of possibility for Oklahoma State to make a comeback. I mean, we've seen some crazier comebacks in college football, not just West Virginia specifically this season, but talking about the Mountaineers, with their big comeback in West Virginia's last game against Kansas. So it never feels as if sometimes a lead is safe enough. So with pretty much the whole fourth quarter to play, down 24 at that point, you wouldn't suspect it, especially at that point in the game when Ollie Gordon went out with an injury, but who knows? So to put Oklahoma State away with pretty much an entire fourth quarter to play, that was big. That was like the nail in the coffin. That had anybody else who was trying to hang in there since they started to flow out of the stadium. The orange and black fans wanting to hit the exit doors. And disgust at that point, even worse so, because they probably had major sunburn by that point in the game of how hot it was. So those, I feel like, were the 2 key moments. Jaheim Joseph, huge at that time, huge to just stop any sort of a rally by Oklahoma State offensively, but then just putting the final nail in the coffin. And isn't it good? Like, you can exhale as a Mountaineer fan to say, like, this is what we're used to. This is what we are accustomed to. And it's so pivotal, I feel like, for, to get some younger guys out on the field, to get them game experience. I mean, that's why, that helps everything out, is that when you can have some moments within your season to get your second and third stringers some valuable game experience. I mean, Jacob Boyce got put on notice there with giving up the touchdown late to Oklahoma State. Just terrible coverage. I think it was DeJon Stribling. Owned him at that point in coverage. But that's good. That's what I mean. You need moments like that where it's like true freshmen getting out on the field. You learn something that motivates you that next next week in practice throughout the rest of the season. Day Farmer getting a carry in this game, Dior Hubbard getting a carry in this game. It motivates you. It feels as if, if you're destined for a red shirt or you are expiring that 1 year's worth of eligibility, it was worth it that you got into the game as a 17, 18-year-old kid playing Division I, Power 4, college football, to be able to do that. And you can only afford to do that when you're up big in games like this in the fourth quarter. So that is why, just going back to my point from my last video before this game preview, it just plays into my point. And this is what I had some disagreements with some of the other, West Virginia YouTubers out there, especially on Twitter, scoring early and playing with a lead. And if that means running a more up-tempo, high-flying, aggressive, vertically attacking offense, to do so, you see the results here. How good did that feel to win that game that way? I do not want to see West Virginia slug it out in the mud like it's the no man's land of World War I for 3 quarters to then learn, you need to play complementary football, to then think like, okay, this is where we turn the ignition onto the keys of the car and try and win it in the fourth quarter. So if it took till, Game 5? Yeah, Game 5 for West Virginia to finally figure it out, to create that offensive continuity, to have that confidence, and maybe during the bye week, Neil Brown and Chad Scott just had I don't want to say a heart-to-heart, but just had this, moment of reflection, time period to take a step back and think, this is the last that West Virginia has with Garrett Green as quarterback. Do you want to try and, do it our way and play complementary football? And that's the kind of, if that's what we're going to call the type of offense that they had through that point in time, or just go out there and raise hell and we're going to fire everything that we've got. And I'm telling you, it makes a difference when you're playing with a lead rather than playing from behind or playing tied, when you have a defense like this that's trying to cover both a run game and a pass game. So that West Virginia, especially in the second half, could sit back, especially also when Ollie Gordon left, could sit back more in coverage and not have to worry so much about the run game. So things that I liked from this game, and there are a lot of them. There are a lot of things that I liked from this game, was that Neil Brown and Chad Scott, great segue here, identified Oklahoma State's defect and stabbed them again and again and again. And that was the rush defense without Colin Oliver. And then that was huge news right there before kickoff that linebacker Nick Martin wasn't going to compete in this contest, apparently because of injury. But to lose your 2 all Big 12 linebackers from a season ago, that was absolutely devastating, because that just exposed what was already a weak point of the Oklahoma State defense to make it even weaker. And did West Virginia's 3-headed monster in the rushing attack capitalize? Jaheim White was awesome, his best game of the 2024 season. If some people, I'd listened to some podcasts in the last week or two saying, is Jaheim White possibly in a sophomore slump? No, it was because of Neil Brown's conservative play calling. And just being so predictable. And also, they played against a down opponent, like I said, who's missing their 2 linebackers, but he made them pay. How many times with those spin move or finding the right hole to run through, especially whenever he got to the outside, I felt like his vision and awareness on this game was at its peak, and it paid off with the way his statistics ended on the day. 19 carries, 158 yards, and a touchdown. He was awesome. Garrett Green, 10 carries, 86 yards, and a touchdown. And C.J. Donaldson, 20 carries for 77 yards and 2 touchdowns. I'm also glad to see that Jalen Anderson got into the game there in the final drive. 3 carries for 19 yards. He will forever have, as part of his Mountaineer legacy in his career, he will always have that 2022 game in which he was the savior. He was the difference in the Mountaineers defeating the Cowboys 2 years ago. So to get back out on the field and get those 3 carries, he deserved it. He earned it, I feel like, in memory for what he did 2 years ago as then a sophomore. Also, Dior Hubbard getting a carry. I mentioned this. Day Farmer getting a carry. So good experience there for the true freshman. Also, another thing I liked, West Virginia's defensive commitment to shutting down Ollie Gordon. Held him to 13 carries for 50 yards. The long of the day was 14 for Gordon. Now, what I would say, and if you're an Oklahoma State fan watching this video, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I would really, if I'm Mike Gundy, really be considering some sort of a change at offensive coordinator with Casey Dunn, given his predictability and stubbornness. A guy like me who just talks about this on the internet should not be able to completely dissect any scheme your entire defense and then it play out and come to fruition on Saturday. But that's exactly what I felt like was happening because of how predictable, simplistic, and stubborn this Oklahoma State attack offensively was. Maybe they just feel like that's their best bet is, run with Gordon. If it's short yard situation, run with Gordon again. Or, if it's longer than, say, 3rd and 2, or, you've done that for consecutive series, throw with Alan Bowman. And maybe they just think that Alan Bowman's washed. And after this now 2 interception performance, I would be very critical and very, I don't know how I want to say this, strategic with how I use these remaining 6 games. Because Bowman, finally, his college eligibility will expire come the end of this regular season. What does Oklahoma State have waiting in the wings for 2025 and beyond? Because I don't see it. And Garrett Rangel, Mike Gundy's son, transferred this past off season. So you're losing Bowman. What does the future look like in Stillwater? And something else that I really didn't like this, and I'm, again, I'm a West Virginia fan. I'm not an Oklahoma State fan. But I found it almost despicable when color commentator Kirk Morrison said that whenever Ollie Gordon went off with his injury, no matter what the extent of it was, said that in a nutshell that what he directly said was that should be Ollie Gordon's last carry as an Oklahoma State Cowboy. And I find that despicable because what you're essentially saying is Gordon needs to quit on his team. That he needs to give up, that his prospects in the NFL is more important than these last 6 remaining games of his call. 6. We're not talking about trying to opt out of a bowl game, which, again, the data on that is pretty, since Christian McCaffrey became the poster child for the first one to do this, opt out of meaningless bowl games, of how many decide to play in a bowl game and that making a difference on their draft stock and then, of course, their NFL career, even further down the line, not making a difference. So that's a stupid point. But second, to then sit out of a second half of a season, so that's it? Like you're going to end your junior season only really putting in two full seasons of college football work? I get his point. I think he's not wrong in his presumption that Ollie Gordon, and I said this during the pre-show, if Ashton Genty is the first running back off the board for the NFL draft, Ollie Gordon should be second, no doubt. But should he really quit on his college team, who again is 3-3, could go on who knows? I mean, the season is not over. The season is not over for Oklahoma State. It may feel like it. People like me on the internet might say that. Their prospects of getting to the Big 12 championship game are practically 0 at this point. But it's not to say that Ollie Gordon can't go out there, perform to the best of his abilities. And what I'll say about this is you only live life once, yo. Like, you really do. Your college years, when you look back on the collective career of your life and you think back to something that, like this pivotal kind of a moment to say I want to opt out of the rest of my college football, junior season and then go on to, for one, like the NFL scouts, draft ownership, general managers, all of that are going to take that into consideration to show that you are that much of a me-first player to be the one to ever do something like this, to sit out a second half of an entire season. He had the DUI experience preseason. Again, I talked about this during the pre-show, the rumblings and just strangeness of NIL with Oklahoma State. And it just seeming like it's a constant uphill battle for their players. And I don't know if this is Mike Gundy necessarily losing the locker room, or he's so old school and so against players. And like, again, I have a rough time with the NIL model of today, of the upfront pay-for-play model, rather than NIL being the true version of NIL, in which players are able to capitalize off their name, image, and likeness from outside entities, like all that Livy Dunn is doing, like that's shown throughout her Netflix show, and how she's able to be a brand ambassador for different for different companies, where it seems as if there's a real power struggle between the players, and I don't know what their NIL payroll situation is. Is it drastically lower than others of comparable talent and ability within the Power Four? Is there just this hard stance by Mike Gundy of wanting to put the fist down and saying, like, you will play for me, and battling his players, making it a negative talking point? Again, too far down the rabbit hole in the context of this game. But for Kirk Morrison to go on there and say that he, in a way, self-redshirting is a bad problem in college. Like what Xavier Townsend did earlier this week with UCF, and West Virginia had this situation last year with a couple of its wide receivers, Cortez Bram, Jeremiah Aaron. It's a real problem that if teams if players on teams who feel as if their teams have gotten off to slow starts, or they're not getting the ball to the extent that they feel as if they're deserved, or again, Matthew Sluka's situation at UNLV, not getting compensated in the way that he feels as if he in broken promises. It's a bad, again, the NIL, the way that NIL and it's become pay for play is the dark cloud that hangs over college football that unfortunately we have to talk about in the context of the preseason, the during season, the postseason. It's always a talk about that we have this NFL professional model within a college game by players who are not employees, but yet making schools millions of dollars. And like that's how they have to be paid by fans like us to be able to go out there and be willing to compete every single Saturday. It's nuts. It really is nuts. So for Kirk Morrison to go on there and say that, you would not have said this 10 years ago. You definitely would not have said this 20 years ago. But this is where we are in the player empowerment movement of college football, in which the pendulum for so many decades swung so far to the NCAA and the institutions, and now it's swung all the way back to the players, and this is what you get. So very curious to see how this situation with Ollie Gordon plays out throughout the rest of the season, and where do possibly, in the bigger scheme of things, the bigger picture of college football, how things shake out to meet more in the middle. Because if you hear I feel like this topic comes up every single week on College Football Game Day on ESPN, and it's what drove coaches like Nick Saban out of the game from Alabama, and I feel like it's getting closer and closer for awesome coaches like Mike Gundy to just say, I'm done with this, the hell with this, and I'm out. I'm calling it a career. What else for me really to achieve, and can I necessarily achieve it here in the power structure of the P2 in the Big Ten and the SEC and everybody else. So I'll pause on that point. If you didn't like that comment by Morrison, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it here on YouTube. Leave a comment. So other things that I really liked by West Virginia in this game, Josiah Trotter. What more can you say about this guy? Clearly becoming one of the all-stars, best players, on this West Virginia, and most important players on this West Virginia defense, but team collectively. Team high 6 tackles in this game. In the third quarter interception in which he toe tapped against the sidelines, just like a wide receiver. Wow, big play. Put that in his first season, redshirt freshman season highlight tape come the end of the season. Also, the defensive line coming away with 2 sacks. And I mean, 2 sacks might not seem like a whole lot of it, but when Oklahoma State had only allowed 1 at that point on the season, that's awesome to come away with 2 really back-to-back. It felt like first Hammond Russell, then Fatorma Mulba. I love what this defensive line is doing, and also in tandem with TJ Jackson and stunting. Coming from different creative angles, outside, going inside, and switching back and forth, confusing some of these offensive lines who are most of the times running sort of like zone blocking schemes or some like even in protection. The stunting really confuses some of them, and they were able to get to Bowman on this day and knock him hard. And then also for Nico Marchiol. So happy for the guy. I mean, just incredible, the patience that he's shown. Not very many truly redshirt sophomore quarterbacks in today's world of college football would wait 3 full seasons to become the starter. And that is what he should be in 2025. More evidence of showing not only how important he is for this current team, given the style of play of Garrett Green and how it just takes one awkward fall onto your shoulder with the ball collect. Maybe we'll get an update come tomorrow with the extent of that injury, or was it really not that big a deal? Just kind of like knocked the wind out of him. He was okay in Garrett Green, but for Nico to come in like that, poised, and looked as if he didn't really skip a beat. I know he had the one fumble that kind of derailed a drive there in the Kansas game 2 weeks ago, but to come in like that, to have that beautifully thrown laser to Traylon Ray, and then also run over an opponent. I mean, kind of gave like the LeBron James too small when he bucked the Oklahoma State defender for a big game rushing the ball. Just goes to show, I feel like he's just more than your average backup, that he is the quarterback for the future, and I've loved seeing him come onto the field, and whenever he does, like my worry that from say an Alan Bowman to a Garrett Rangel, like West Virginia doesn't have that problem. So love that for Nico, and just keep telling him, if I was his coach, just keep being patient. We appreciate you. We're thankful that you're patient. Your time is coming as the Mountaineer starter. So now I'm going to really nitpick three things, 2 of them more so than the last one from this game. So 10 minutes and 12 seconds left in the third quarter. West Virginia's up 31-7, 4th and 2 at the Oklahoma State 28. Donaldson misses the hole to the outside right, instead turning upfield too soon into a stacked pile of bodies, and comes up a yard short on the 4th down try. So that turnover on downs, I feel like, cost West Virginia at least 3 points on the possession, maybe more, the way that West Virginia was rolling at that point in the game offensively. I know that was still coming out of the halftime break, but you could have broken Oklahoma State's will earlier, and that could have been the drive to do it. But instead, turnover on downs gave Oklahoma State some life. So didn't like that. At first I was like, after West Virginia had gone to Donaldson on the previous play and he gave up and he had a 4-yard gain, 4th and 2, it was like 4th and 1.5. And I didn't like the play call initially, especially because of the result. But when I watched back the other angle of the review, I'm glad that the camera crew showed this angle. He completely missed it to the right. Good Nick Malone or Traylon Davis block off to the right. Could have went outside like the B or C gap and easily got to the first down yardage. Instead, tried to turn it upfield too early, and that's what got him stopped. So you hate that. What I hated more, now 1 minute and 1 second left to play in the third quarter. West Virginia still up 31-7 at this point. 4th and 5 at the Oklahoma State 32. Garrett Green rushes to the outside right toward the sideline, and he slides 6 inches too soon. 6 inches too soon to the point that the officials go to the review booth and overturn it. And I'm just like, oh, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? That's what you get out of, like, that's a worst case scenario of what happens, because he could have, I mean, a lot of things. He could have kept running straight out of bounds. He could have, started the slide just 6 inches sooner and still would have been fine. Just like, it was just one of those really nitpick things that the officials had to call there, went against West Virginia, and you don't get it. Turnover on downs once again. So easily could have been a first down pickup for Garrett Green. I like the decision to slide, given he took the injury earlier in the game, but that close. You could have put Oklahoma State away, broke their will, and you fail to do so again. Not until finally, after the defensive stop, the Hudson Clement catch, Donaldson finally puts Oklahoma State away at the beginning of the fourth quarter. The other thing I'll say, and this isn't a criticism, it's really not a criticism, but in context of how West Virginia could have won this game by even bigger than 24, is because Neal Brown decided to not run up the score on Oklahoma State. West Virginia sat on the ball for the final 8.5 minutes of this game in the fourth quarter. Included a phantom roughing the kicker penalty on punter Ollie Straw, so you appreciate that. I'll just say that this is evidence that West Virginia fans can point to if they want to use the winning with class argument against Penn State fans because of James Franklin and running up the score. So if you want to apples to apples compare, I don't know if even we'll say an apples to apples, because I know how it went down at the very end of that 2023 game, using timeouts and trying to, and West Virginia had already beat the spread, but I don't always think that's something that coaches are thinking about during the game. I'm thinking they're trying to get more playing time for younger players, trying to do some things that they haven't necessarily done or want to see outside of practice in a game situation. But if you want to argue that West Virginia won with class there by not running up the score by Oklahoma State, more power to you, instead of the way that Penn State does things. So my overall takeaways from this game, things I liked, things I didn't necessarily like as much, and then a quick recap. I think that, again, plays into my point of West Virginia, how important it is for West Virginia to score early, look good offensively, and play with a lead, and how that inspires defensive confidence. I think this was also valuable experience for West Virginia to learn how to close, because, again, 24 points in the second half can be made up by an offense that should have been on this day better than they produced because of all the talent that they have at receiver and at their starting running back position. 24 points was not insurmountable. So learning how to close, even though you had those two goofs in the third quarter, the Donaldson run that could have been a capitalization on a fourth down play, Garrett Green's slide that should have been a capitalization, led to more points. To learn how to get up early on an opponent and not let them back into this game, this was a valuable learning experience for this team, because that's something you can't teach until you're able to do it. You have to be able to prove it, and then you're able to, believe in yourself. That should inspire confidence as they go in this stretch against Iowa State, against Kansas State, and then Arizona. So I also think I got to give him some flowers on one of my three keys to victory, nailing all three of them. Looking good out of a bye week. There was no show of rust, I felt like. If anything, West Virginia looked energized, looked fully healthy. Aubrey Burke's back, Reed Carrico back. Awesome. No real injury situation, I feel like, from this game. I think Tomas Remak went down at one point in time. Rodney Gallagher went back at one point in time. Green got hurt. Nico Marchiol looked like he was limping at some point, but everybody, I feel like, came back at some point in the game, so it might just be some football bumps and bruises, nothing really injury, just a little bit hurt. So to look that good, look that fresh out of a bye week and not have any sort of rust, and then taking it to a road opponent, quieting the crowd and keeping them quiet. Anytime you can win on the road and doing it in that drastic of a fashion, and that's awesome. And just chalk it up. I think this is a good mantra. If 14 was West Virginia's rallying cry for the 2023 season, 1-0 each week, 1-0 this week should be West Virginia's rallying cry from here on out, or at least through until we get to November. So with eyes on the prize, potentially, of the Big 12 championship game. Because now, starting with that Kansas game, this was another game that you had looking at the preseason schedule that's like, this is a gauntlet. So West Virginia's now 2-0 with now, okay, here are the big hitters. Here are your 3, 4, 5 hitters coming up here with Iowa State, Kansas State, and then on the road at Arizona, a place you've never played before, new conference opponent. I know they just lost yesterday to Texas Tech, but that's a far away flight, flying into Phoenix, then down to Tucson, then that's a big journey. That's a big journey West Virginia's going to have to make, but I just like that. So, last thing I'll end with, now 35 minutes into this video, and this is kind of the way I'll end it here. Does this mean that West Virginia is back on track again? You should feel good, good about this team, and this is a good team. This is a good team. West Virginia, is right on the precipice, I feel like, of being ranked. Like right there, I would say pause. I would just say pause, not yet. Not yet. And it's not because of the skeptic in me or anything like that. It's because you've now beaten Kansas, who losing now to Arizona State and losing to TCU last week. Kansas might finish at the bottom of this conference or right there ahead of Houston. And then you're beating an Oklahoma State team that's now 0-3 in Big 12 play. And who knows the way the rest of their season's going to go with everything, the turmoil that's going on within that locker room, I feel like. Now, I do like if West Virginia can keep that kind of competitive effort against Iowa State and Kansas State next week. Now we're talking. I think they can be competitive with both of those opponents. The way that West Virginia competed and performed, that's the kind of performance that you need to put up against everyone on the schedule. The kind of performances that you had against Penn State, against Pitt especially, and even against Albany, you cannot have. You cannot, and even, for 55 minutes against Kansas. Like, that is not a winning formula. And I don't want to just say anything so preposterous or rambunctious of getting ahead of my skis and saying, like, yes, after beating Kansas, and beating this very injured, influx Oklahoma State team, like West Virginia's back, baby. No. You're going against who I think is going to be a number 10 team in the country, or right there in between 10 to 15, Iowa State team next week. It's going to be electric, night game, coal rush game, blackout in Morgantown. That's where the rubber's going to meet the road. And if West Virginia beats Iowa State next week, now we're talking. Now we're in the money, and I feel like, wow, what a 2-game stretch of Iowa State and Kansas State coming up in these next couple of weeks. So, am I all in and like all the sins of the backyard brawl are forgiven and like everything, water under the road? I'm going to say no, but football is so, you got to have a short memory. It's on to the survive and advance, on to the next one. I also just love what this defense is doing. The linebackers' willingness to tackle, be aggressive. The defensive line creating pressure. Again, when I talked about with the way they're stunting on the defensive line, creating pressure, getting sacks, and also now finally creating turnovers. 2 more interceptions to this defensive's credit. That's awesome. That's the kind of defensive effort and performance at the outcome, at the end of it. Like I said, you cannot, and I love that. I love that. The endurance wave, enduring the wave after wave of what Oklahoma State brought to the table. And when it was like, okay, this is Oklahoma State's opportunity, bam, Jaheim Joseph takes it away. That was awesome. That's what you need to do. And then third, offensively, I think that Garrett Green, and I don't want to be too overly critical on his passing from this game, given how great the rushing attack was, but 9 of 15, was that due in some of the passes that he overthrew, just was out of sync with his wide receivers? Was that due to the injury? Was the injury to his non-throwing shoulder? Was it to his throwing shoulder? If it was to the non-throwing shoulder, how did that impact the throwing shoulder or his collarbone, so on and so forth? That's what I mean to say, that I feel like the passing is still not optimal, still not peak, still not 2018 Will Grier, Gary Jennings, David Sills, Marcus Sims, all that. But I feel as if, once again, for the second straight week, 4 pass catchers are emerging to the top. Talking about Hudson Clement, Traylon Ray, Rodney Gallagher, Cole Taylor. That's who it seems like, looking at the numbers to prove it. And I wish I had the snap counts for you, but it seems like that's who Green is feeling more comfortable with, and this coaching staff feels most comfortable with being on the field. Hudson Clement, Traylon Ray, Cole Taylor, and Rodney Gallagher. So it's now up for Garrett Green over these last 6 games of the regular season with these 4 pass catchers to maximize on his potential and be more successful, because you're not going to get days in which you can run the ball 60 times and be that effective and run it down opponent's throat. I know that's West Virginia's bread and butter. I know that's what Neil Brown wants to do, and really in his DNA, very similarly to Don Nehlen, and wanting to assert your will on the defense. And if you can't stop it, just continue to feed the offensive line and feed the running backs to let them work and hammer it out. But against a team like next week against Iowa State, Kansas State, Arizona, the November opponents, still got to get to know them a little bit more. I still think they're a little bit all over the place, but Texas Tech is really seems like an ascension after their slow start to the season and being on the precipice of being ranked, I feel like. But if Jaden Bray, Preston Fox, Justin Robinson are kind of on the outside looking in, not really going to find a role, I feel like, for this 2024 season, or maybe they will. Maybe there's still some opportunities. I want these 4 pass catchers right here to do work, to hammer it out. So, giving you a lot to think about. Again, an awesome 38-14 victory for the Mountaineers over the Oklahoma State Cowboys. How'd you feel by the end of the night? I was feeling great. Like the stress of the weekly Stress Virginia game, man, I was feeling really good there by that third quarter. And I cannot say that often, feeling almost as if it's like back in the Big East days with Pat White at quarterback. So, felt great on that. How'd you feel? How excited are you about Iowa State next week? I'll come back later this upcoming week and give you the preview show for what's going to be an awesome Coal Rush game in Morgantown, a game I might still go to. I'll let you know by that preview show that if I'll be there in Morgantown, I'd love to meet up with fans who tuned into this video. So, love to know your thoughts, good, bad, or indifferent. Leave your comments here on YouTube. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your dog that I do this each and every week and have a lot of fun doing it. And hail West Virginia, a victory for the Mountaineers. Let's go.